Welcome back to the All Things Dead podcast with your host, Steve Kaczewski, the podcast about everything in the Walking Dead universe, from The Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead World Beyond, and anything future-wise in the Walking Dead universe. Here we break down new episodes, going over old episodes for anybody that is thinking about getting into watching The Walking Dead. Any huge rumors that come out, anything that gets told, will be able to be found here on the All Things Dead podcast. The video version of this can be found on the Coach Steve Show YouTube channel. Go over to playlists and you can find the All Things Dead playlist where there are other episodes of this podcast. The Coach Steve Show YouTube channel is my other podcast that you can also check out. But if you're more interested in just The Walking Dead, go to that playlist and you can find the All Things Dead playlist. The audio version can be found anywhere that you listen to your podcast, Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever you listen to your podcast, the All Things Dead podcast can be found there. So let's get into it. We are moving along in our Walking Dead rewatch. I am rewatching this and it's almost like the first time. So we are rewatching this together for anybody out there that's thinking about getting into watching The Walking Dead. We are rewatching it together. We are now on Season 1, Episode 3, titled Tell It to the Frogs. We leave off from the last episode where Rick meets new people in Atlanta, where he is looking for his wife, Lori, and his son, Carl. And we knew in the last episode that these people that he found in Atlanta are also with his group, the group where Shane is, where Lori is, where Carl is. Just a small world after all. And we leave off where he met Merle Dixon. And Merle was not very nice to everybody. He was a danger to themselves. Rick had handcuffed him. A new character named T-Dog had the key and dropped the key down the drain, and we left off Rick and Glenn and everybody else with like Andrea, with Morales. They were able to escape. They left Merle on the roof because the key was dropped down the drain. T-Dog had to leave him there, but he did lock up the door. And that's where we ended our last episode, and they immediately pick up where it left off. They show Merle up on the roof, and Merle is talking to himself, and he's muttering something about fighting somebody mouthing off, and he punched him in the mouth. Looks like Merle is delusional, and then things start to come back, and the walkers are pushing through the door, and then it comes to fruition that T-Dog did put the chain up on the door to not let the walkers get in, and Merle has this realization of where he's at. So it looked like Merle tried to literally pull the handcuff off of the pipe thing that it's connected to, and it looked like he was dehydrated, and maybe because he's out in the sun. But if you think about day-wise, it's not even been a day. It looks like that he's been up there. It looks like it's just been a couple hours from where they were trying to figure out where to go, but it looks like Merle's had this realization. He has a coming to Jesus moment. He literally is praying to God and Jesus about helping him get out, helping him, get out of this. The walkers are coming through. They can hear him. They can smell him. Then he goes back to his old ways saying, I'm not going to beg you. And I start laughing. It's funny to see, like, I'm not begging anybody. Why would I beg you? And he's talking to God and Jesus. And he's going after the saw. It's probably to saw off the handcuffs. And then, again, I can't talk good enough about the intro. The intro to The Walking Dead is very creepy. I'm not into horror movies or anything like that. The Walking Dead is probably where I cut it off. But I love this. If you guys rewatch this on Netflix and you skip the intro, I don't want you to listen to this no more or watch this anymore. There's no reason for you to. The intro is very creepy. It's very Walking Dead like. It's very dark. It shows you. I just love it. So Netflix, you don't have to ask to skip the intro on The Walking Dead. Nobody's gonna skip that. Then it starts to get real interesting. We fast forward to back at the camp where, Shane, we talked about this before. Shane and Lori have a thing. Shane, during these shorter episodes, looks like he's trying to be a father figure to Carl. They talk about catching frogs, and that, fitting for the title, Tell It to the Frogs. They're talking about catching frogs. And they just have this look to each other. Lori and Shane just have this look to each other. And then the group shows up, and you just know it's going to happen. Like this is an episode where you're kind of foreseeing what may happen. Because the questions still are not answered up to this point of we saw where Rick left the hospital, and the question becomes, did Shane and Lori and them were not able to get to him in the hospital because the hospital was completely destroyed? Were not able to get to him? Did they have to evacuate and this and that? But they seem like Rick is, so it's a couple things. Did they think Rick was dead, or were they just not able to get to him and they just assume he's dead? Or did Lori not try as hard as she probably should have? Did Shane not try as hard, or was Shane the voice of reason, like, we can't go get him? We don't know. So, like I said, that's probably the only one of the big question marks that we don't have answered, but we see them pull up. We have, Glenn with his Dodge Charger, Challenger with the big horn screaming through, probably going to draw a lot of walkers. We're not sure. They all pull in, and then we're just waiting. Rick is sitting in the van thinking like, man, I got to meet all this group. Where is Lori? Where's Carl? Atlanta was the place where was told there was going to be the safe haven. So like, where can he go to find his family? Like, what's about to happen? And it's an emotional thing. Like watching it, you're like, oh, this is very emotional. He gets out, and Dad, and Carl is running. Lori seems like she's seen a ghost. Shane really looks like he's seen a ghost, because when this happens, it's very emotional. He's hugging Carl. He's hugging Lori. He looks over at Shane. Shane is kind of smiling, but we all know, anybody out there that's watching this with me, we all know that they're hooking up and this and that. And so, like I said before in other episodes, did they have something during the marriage? And then I just brought up the question, were they told that, this was, maybe did they try that hard to get Rick? I don't know, but Lori's reaction was very happy to see him. So now it begs the question, what happened? What happened? And we just get to really see other characters. They sit around this nice little fire. We have Andrea and her sister Amy. You have Glenn, we have Carl, and then we meet Dale. You have T-Dog, Morales, and his wife, and I believe 2 kids. They're sitting around. His name, I don't know if they've said his name, but I'll let you guys know. Jim, who is around Dale. Jackie. Who was a part of that group. And then they kind of foreshadow a little bit of other things, but Rick just kind of gives the story of what happened, how he got there. He's grateful to Shane, and if you guys are like me watching this, you're like, if only you knew, Rick, if only you knew what was happening in that woods, and who knows what other happened in your marriage. I would be careful what you're thanking them for. Be very careful, Rick. And now, and this is kind of showing parts of the apocalypse. It's weird in the apocalypse where you now have to rely on people that you may have probably, I don't think anybody here knew each other besides, unless you were related. So you have this group over here, and then you have this other family. Come to find out, you have Ed, his name is Ed, his wife Carol, and then they have a daughter, and they're kind of off on their own. And you can kind of tell, we saw before where Shane was kind of the leader. There was a little confrontation, and Ed put another log on the fire. And this is where Shane shows survival mode things where, hey, why are you putting another log on the fire? And he says it's cold. needs to put another log on. He said we need to keep the flames low, which is actually on Shane's part is pretty smart. If the flames are high, they are trying to avoid any type of way to attract walkers. They're trying to avoid any way to maybe even attract other people, because we haven't even, because think about it, like if it's the end of the world, it's pretty lucky that these people with Shane and Lori and Carl, how they've come together, but we don't know what other people are, and they're still figuring out, I think, the walkers. They know we've figured out that smell can attract them, noise, but they don't want to take any risks, and that's kind of why I think they're living in the woods. They want to be away from any highly population. They're hoping all the walkers can kind of stay in the city. They're not going to walk up. You've heard Dale talk about, the ravine. The walkers don't come out that far, as long as they don't draw a huge attention to themselves. But when Shane goes to confront Ed about it, right away you can tell this is not a good marriage. Ed is yelling at his wife, Carol, to take the wood off the fire after it's already in the fire. And then Shane checks on them. So right there, at least for me, when I'm watching it, you can kind of tell this is not a good marriage or something's not right. And then during all this, they tell about Merle and say no, and they've talked about and they straight up said nobody was going to care about Merle. But then we find out he has a brother named Daryl that is out hunting. And so Rick and T-Dog and that group are going to have to figure out how to tell Merle's brother, who we have yet to meet yet. But if, at least for me watching it, oh my goodness, is he anything like Merle? It's not going to go well. And then the big rest of the episode just continues with, Rick and Lori and Carl are in their tent, and Rick is just saying, just kind of showing his love for his family, saying, I knew you were alive. You guys took the wedding photos down, or Lori, you took the wedding photos, so that's how I knew you were alive. And you can kind of tell, I'm not a fan of Lori. Just from these 3 episodes, I am not a fan, but I believe her name is Sarah. She does the good acting. I don't know if that's what she was trying to do. If she was, good job. If that was not what she was trying to do, well, sorry, I don't like you. You could tell that her mind is spinning. It's cranking because she gave Shane a weird look, and watching it, it's okay, you guys are together, but now Rick is back, so now it has to be you're back with Rick. And Rick is just showing how he wants to be a better husband and father, because it goes back to the very first episode where he's confiding in Shane about his marriage and things were bad. But even Lori was like, you're here. I apologize for all the bad things. I apologize for this. And, Rick does say, even though it's the apocalypse, we have a second chance. How many people in marriages say they have a second chance? And he's right, so they get a second chance. So the biggest parts of this episode is just kind of meeting new characters, because we just had Rick and Morgan. Then you slowly start to meet Glenn, T-Dog, and Andrea. And now you're meeting more people, reuniting a family. And regardless, Rick doesn't know anything about Lori and Shane. He's like, Shane saved my wife and kid. I am forever grateful. And that's kind of where we're at. Then we get to the morning, and this is kind of where it's going to pick back up, where Rick's like, hey, it goes up to basically Lori and say, listen, that guy Merle I left on the roof? Yeah, I need to go back and get him. And starts a little bit of controversy with he and Lori already. 24 hours of being back together, and she's like, you just got here. You're going to go risk your life for him? And then we finally get to meet Daryl Dixon. And for you guys that are rewatching, watching for the first time, yes, that is Norman Reedus. One of my favorite movies is The Boondock Saints. That is him. He looks very similar. I don't know if they were filmed around the same time or not. But he does look very similar to his character in Boondock Saints, one of my favorite movies. So if you guys had watched that and maybe is looking at Norman Reedus like, who are you? He did play a character in Blade. But yes, we finally get to meet Daryl Dixon when the young kids stumble upon a walker. Rick and Shane and the rest of the men find this walker is literally eating a deer, the poor deer. Like, that's the only thing about The Walking Dead way back when. I don't remember it all, but a lot of it is the gory stuff with animals. It's not as bad in the newer stuff, but this stuff, yes, it is. They kill the walker or chop its head off. Dale chops its head off. And then we finally get to meet Daryl. Comes in hot. Little bit loud like Merle, but not as bad. That was his deer, and now they can't eat it because of the walker that ate it. He has all these squirrels. Now it's the moment of truth of, hey, listen, we got to tell you about Daryl or Merle. Rick has to confront him that he left, or he handcuffed Merle. T-Dog had dropped the key to the handcuffs, but what I said before, it looked like T-Dog was chaining it up to make sure the door was fine for Merle. And he said, yes, he confirms it. He lets Daryl know, yes, Rick handcuffed him, but I had the key. I dropped it down this drain. I couldn't get him out. We were leaving very quickly. And I chained the door shut so no walkers could get up there. So he should still be alive. And so Daryl says, I'm going to go get him. Where is he so I can go get him? And this is where Lori, and I think this might be hinting at maybe not quite what Rick and Lori's marriage was like or what kind of caused the rifts. But she said, Rick's going to show you. Isn't that right, Rick? And Rick's like, I'm going back. And there's already like this. And it is going back. And this shows a little riff between Lori and Rick. T-Dog says he's going to go back because it's his responsibility. And then Rick does talk Glenn into going back because he knows the area. Lori would be, grateful and feel better if you went. So now you've got Rick, Glenn, T-Dog, and Daryl making this plan and this journey to try to go get Merle. And then we finally get some dialogue with Rick and Shane. Shane is saying to Rick how he doesn't like this idea because you're risking men. Like, as much as maybe we don't like Shane at this point, he makes little good ideas or has good thoughts. He says, you're risking 4 strong, abled men to go into Atlanta where there's all these walkers, where we should be here protecting camp, have more strength in numbers, and you're going to risk us by sending you guys out there and the risk of you not coming back, and you just got back. You just got back to your wife and kid. Rick is still has the mindset of, I'm a police officer. Then he says, no human should die this way, even Merle. And it was very made clear by the group, nobody there liked Merle. Nobody there thinks that Merle would have saved Rick. But Rick still seems to have like this moral compass. Like, the world ended, but he is still living that cop life. He's still living that pre-apocalypse life, which I think is kind of refreshing because you have Shane a little bit that is kind of thinking, us, survive us now. Rick still kind of has the other mindset. But again, we got to think, we don't know how long Rick was there. We all knew that he didn't have a beard, went into his coma. We don't know how long. We're assuming a couple months. So Shane and all the rest of them have had time to kind of adapt to this apocalyptic life or come to terms with that it has happened. Rick, I think, has come to terms that it's happened, but it's taking longer because it just kind of got sprung on him. There was no build up to this. We don't know how it was built up to them, but we know they've had time. So if Rick's going to have his mind change to what Shane is, it's going to take time, but he still has that moral compass. So they're off. They're off back to Atlanta to go get Merle Dixon. And like I said, we last saw him the previous day, I guess, in their world, but we saw him at the beginning of the episode. He was on the roof fighting for his life to get out of there. Well, to get unchained. The walkers were still held back by the door. Then we kind of get this. We finally get the meetup, the meetup in the confrontation with Rick, or with Shane and Lori. Shane takes Carl down to catch frogs like he promised. They're down there to catch frogs. Lori goes down there and doesn't like it, saying, Carl, you were supposed to stay by Dale. Why are you going with Shane? Get up there. Don't listen to Shane. And then we finally get an answer to the burning question at the beginning of this podcast. What happened with Rick in the hospital? And Lori kind of lays it down for Shane, like, my family's off limits. She says, don't talk to my son, don't talk to me, don't talk to my family. And then Shane says, like, I think we need to talk about us. Rick's my best friend. And then Lori kind of goes up and says, you've lost all that, and says, you told me my husband was dead. And then walks away. So right now the question we had at the beginning of this episode of the podcast, and kind of the question probably that was going through these episodes, is why was Rick in the hospital? And so now we have a little bit of an idea now, whether it's the full thing, we don't know. But right now, one of the answers we have is Shane told Lori Rick was dead. And so now it's like, so Shane told Lori Rick was dead. Did he do this to be with Lori? That's kind of what I'm thinking right now at this point in this episode. So now we kind of have that answer. Did he? And it looked like, at the moment when Shane and Carl were trying to catch the frogs, I don't know about you, with Rick being back, Shane tried to look like a dad to Carl. So it's kind of uncomfortable. Then you find out that Shane told Lori that he was dead. So, like, what happened? Did he want to be Carl's dad? So now it's kind of coming around, and it's like, this is uncomfortable. Now, another big part of this episode, which confirms, now remember before we talked about Ed with the fire and the log he put on. He has his wife, Carol, and they have a daughter. So it looks like in this, you have the women doing laundry. So this is kind of the stereotype of, like, the men are strong, the men are going to do this, the men are going to protect. The women are doing the laundry and probably the cooking. And so it's like the world ended and they go back to before, to the old way of thinking way back when. But the strange part is you have the women doing laundry with Ed watching. Then they have a big confrontation. Ed comes over and, because they're laughing, they're making jokes, talking about things they miss in the world. And they make a couple sex jokes and, yeah, it's funny. And then you got Ed coming over and saying, this isn't a comedy club, get back to your work. Andrea confronts Ed. And they have this big blow up. And during all this is happening, you're just like, man, I wish somebody would beat Ed's ass. Shane is now pissed off with Lori and Carl. Maybe he's pissed off that Rick's back because he was going to have a thing going. He's the leader. I mean, I guess he's still the leader. He's the leader. He has the woman of his dreams in Lori. He can be a dad to Carl. And I was rooting for Shane at this moment. Ed slaps Carol, his wife. He's going after the women. Shane pulls him over and just starts wailing on him. And as I'm watching this, I'm like, yes, he's doing it. But then he goes way too far. And you could just tell he's taking all of the anger out on Ed for Rick's back. The thing with Lori and Carl. The guys are back in Atlanta trying to save Merle Dixon and try to get this bag of guns that Rick had dropped, and almost beats Ed to death. And he tells him, like, Ed, if you ever touch your wife again, you ever do anything like this again, I will not stop. I will beat you to death. And he almost like starts seizing up because he just got shit kicked out of him. And so So the one time I was rooting for Shane, and he kind of takes it too far. But now we're gonna have this confrontation. Now it's gonna build up. Now you're a little worried. You have Lori confronting Shane to not come near them. We find out that Shane told Lori Rick was dead. So does that mean Shane was in the hospital? More questions to be answered. So now what's gonna happen? Is Rick gonna find out? I have no idea. We're gonna have to find out, figure that part out. And Shane kind of approached his dominance, act like this big tough guy, and now Shane showed him who was boss. And so it's going to be interesting at the camp. And then to end the episode, our group of Daryl, Rick, Glenn, and T-Dog, they make it to Atlanta. They were able to park their big U-Haul van that they took before and be able to walk to where Merle is. And it seemed like the walkers have had time over that 24-hour period to move away from the building. They were able to sneak in there. There was no walkers up at the door. The chain was still on there. They have the bolt cutters to cut it, so it seemed like they were gone. And then we get on the roof, and all we find is Merle's hand and a bloody handcuffs. And that's all we have. So the illusion is that the walkers got through and ate Merle. My question is, how did they get through when the chain was still on there? Were they able to crawl through? Then where were the walkers? Are they up there that we just don't see them because our group just got up there? But Merle is gone, and the illusion here is that he has been eaten. It shows a saw, his hand, and then a bloody handcuffs. The handcuffs are still attached to that little pull thing connected to the big pipe. So did he cut off his hand? Did the walkers get through there and eat him and just leave his hand? I don't know. That's all they show. We have no idea, and that's how our episode ends. The episode on IMDb gave this episode 8.3 out of 10. It was a good episode, but it was a little bit more slower pace, which is what we kind of needed because you have the introductory episode, which was a lot to take in. It's a lot of info, not a lot of action, but we're getting introduced. And you have the last episode that had a lot of stressful situations to get out of Atlanta. And now we have a much slower pace episode, which is what we needed. And it just feels it's going to ramp up. You know, you have the situation at camp. You have this small group of ours in Atlanta. And Merle's gone. So where's Merle? Did he get eaten? Is Rick going to find out about Shane and Lori? How is that going to work if you do? Are we going to find out why Shane told Lori that Rick was dead? A lot of questions that are not answered. But yeah, that's how we end our season 1, episode 3, titled perfectly, Tell It to the Frogs. At the end there, Lori literally told Shane, go tell it to the frogs. So next episode, we will be watching season 1, episode 4 of The Walking Dead. We are moving along in our recaps. Thanks everybody out there for listening. Again, the video version of this All Things Dead podcast can be found on the Coach Steve Show YouTube channel. It's my other podcast, The Coach Steve Show. If you go to that YouTube page, go to playlists. There will be a playlist titled All Things Dead Podcast. It's going to have videos on there from the newer episodes of Fear the Walking Dead. It's going to have the extra 6 episodes from The Walking Dead, and then it's going to have our recaps. So make sure you look at the title if you don't want to know anything about the new episodes. If you have not watched anything, be wary of the title. I title them The Walking Dead 01, 02, or 03 now. So make sure you know what you're watching. The audio versions can be found anywhere podcasts can be listened to, Spotify, Apple, Google, anything like that. When you go there, please like and subscribe, thumbs up. In the comment section, tell me how to get better. On the podcast side, give it a 5-star review, Thumbs up, thumbs down. However, subscribe to it. Please and thank you. It helps get this out there for others in the entertainment world. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next time when we recap The Walking Dead Season 1, Episode 4.